Before we get into this video, I hope you will subscribe and ding that bell so that way you get notified every time I do a community post or when I upload a video. Oh. Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brian here. How's everyone doing today? I hope you're all doing well. Me, I'm not doing particularly bad. Just sitting, relaxing at home. I actually just had gastric sleeve surgery on Tuesday. Yeah, that's a totally different story. It was for weight loss, but yeah, it's a different story. I'll talk about that in a different video. So in this video, I wanted to talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. So I made a video on this a few weeks ago. It only got one view. It got no likes or comments or nothing like that. And only one view. So I decided I'd redo the video. Maybe do it a little bit longer, a little bit better, more in detail, more slower. So yeah, so that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into this video. So Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Released in January of 1990. The third installment of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. This movie was made and produced by New Line Cinema. It was written by David H. Shoach. Some scenes were written by Jeff Burr, and Jeff Burr would end up being the director. And as I said, it would be produced by New Line Cinema. This film stars Viggo Mortensen and Ken Foree. They're probably the most famous people in the films, but it also has R.A. Mihailoff. I can't ever pronounce that man's last name. He did some stunt doubles in Trick or Treat and Krampus movies. But yeah, he plays Leatherface in it. Kate Hodge, who was in London Werewolf, I believe, she plays in it, and the girl from Friday the 13th, Part 7, plays in it. Excuse me. It's not really a star-studded cast. It's got some people in it. One of the actors from Nightmare on Elm Street played in it. But the film was made basically not to outdo the original, but to definitely outdo Part 2 and to sort of make a classic. So I'm going to give you some history on this film. So by the end of the 80s, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which basically made New Line Cinema a major production company, had 5 films and a TV series that was in its 3rd or 4th season. Freddy had also had a bunch of TV appearances, and New Line had felt they had ran Freddy into the ground. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5 was pretty successful, but not nowhere nearly as successful as 3 or 4 or Part 1, and it didn't have the best critic reviews. So New Line Cinema was looking at a franchise that they could really bank off of, a franchise that did not have that many movies yet, but had a couple that they could, make a bunch of sequels and potentially even prequels, maybe even a TV show of, and make big bank. Well, in comes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre by the late 80s had only had 2 films. It had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was released in 1973, was released worldwide and across the U.S. and everything in 1974. And then it had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which was released worldwide in 1986. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, was co-written by Kim Hinkle and Tobe Hooper, and it was directed by Tobe Hooper. It was originally independently released, and then they got some low-budget companies to get behind it to get it a worldwide release. And then Part 2 was released by Cannon Studios, this time being written by Kent Carson and Tobe Hooper, and then directed again by Tobe Hooper. The films didn't have the best critic reviews. They had some good ones, they had some bad ones, but they still made a lot of money. Now, Part 1, this one right here, was a very serious, very scary film. In fact, I would call it one of the scariest movies of all time. And I would put this in probably the top 5 scariest movies of all time, putting that up there with The Conjuring 2, and a couple other movies, maybe Wrong Turn 2. It's a pretty scary movie. Part 2 was released 13 years after, and actually Tobe Hooper did not want to do it, but he decided to do something different. So what they did, the writers and director on Part 2 was, Part 2 had a lot of jump scares like the original, but it was different in a way. It leaned into the black comedy, the dark comedy. It had a lot of laughing scenes. Yes, there is a lot of gore in this, a lot more gore. Yes, there are some jump scares, to remind you that this is a horror movie, and yes, there are kills, and there's death and everything in it. But there's a lot of comedy. Now, it's not like comedy that's gonna have you on the floor crying, but there are some funny scenes in this, and it's kind of campy. It's kind of like Adam West Batman campy. The film did okay. It didn't have the best critic reviews. Excuse me. But it made a lot of money. For a film. It made a decent amount of money in the 80s, and it was a sequel. Tobe Hooper and the writers and cast members thought the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise was done. Well, like I said earlier, New Line Cinema felt that they had ran Freddy into the ground. So what did they do? They went over to Canon, and they bought the rights to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 100% distribution rights to both movies, and took 100% ownership of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, they were going to make the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. They had a name, Leatherface the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, and they had an idea. Before they had even had a cast, a director, a writer, any scene shot, any remote idea of what the movie was going to be about, they decided to make a trailer, and it was released in theaters in May of 1988, during the Nightmare on Elm Street 4, and it's a pretty badass trailer. I would recommend going to watch that. In fact, I'll put the link in the description to this video. It's like one of the greatest horror movie trailers of all time. One of the greatest movie trailers of all time. It's pretty badass. In fact, Kane Hodder, who did some stunt doubles for I.M. Hayloft and played Jason multiple times, the best Jason in the Friday the 13th franchise, in my opinion, would end up playing Leatherface in the trailer. So, like I said, before they even had a director, a cast, an idea, anything, and all they had was a name, Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Is that they wanted the whole point was they wanted this film to focus more on Leatherface, make him sort of more of the villain type. Now, the difficult part was to find a director and a writer who would touch this film, and cast members who would come onto this, because Part 2, even though it was considered campy and didn't get the best critic reviews, made a lot of money, and it was still a Tobe Hooper film. The original was a classic. Part 2 is, in fact, nowadays a classic. So, they were trying to figure out, how can we do this? Who can we get to direct this? So, the first intention was to get Tobe Hooper back. Of course, Tobe Hooper said, absolutely not. I have no interest in this. I'm done with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's an atrocious franchise. I hated both films that I made. I'm not returning. So, without Tobe Hooper, they decided to try to get other people back, to try to get some other people to come in to direct it. And here is a brief list of some people that they wanted to come in and direct it. I can't think, the guy's name is very tough to pronounce. It's the Nightmare on Elm Street 4 director. In fact, here, let's search it up. I know, this is a very unprofessional video. Hey everyone, this is Unhinged Videos. Who directed A Nightmare on Elm Street 4? Rennie Harlan. Rennie Harlan, I remembered his name. So they tried getting Rennie Harlan. He was the first person they went to direct, because he had done Nightmare on Elm Street 4. It was a pretty successful movie, so they thought, well, if he can do Freddy and make a successful sequel, he can do Leatherface and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Well, he turned it down. Then they tried getting Wes Craven, who created Freddy Krueger himself, and the Hills Have Eyes franchise to come in. He turned it down. Then they tried getting Tom Savini, who did makeup and special effects on Part 2, and also worked on the Friday the 13th franchise, and Creepshow, and many other films. He turned it down. Then they tried getting Sam Raimi, who directed the Evil Dead franchise and would later go on to direct the best Spider-Man trilogy, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy, and Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. Well, he turned it down. And then they tried getting John Carpenter. John Carpenter was apparently on the contact list, the man who made Michael Myers himself. Yep. Well, these didn't work out, and plus, these weren't really the person that they wanted. The person that they really wanted was a young writer at the time, Peter Jackson. Yes, Peter Jackson, the man who made the Lord of the Rings franchise and the Hobbit films, who would also go on to direct the reboot of King Kong, and would direct the very sad movie The Lovely Bones, and many other classic and very entertaining and great movies. That's who they were trying to get, and they almost had him. At the end of the hour, it didn't work out. So they were trying to find a director. One night, one of the New Line executives was watching a movie called Offspring. No, that's not the Offspring that I want. From a Whisper to a Scream. A sort of Tales of the Crypt movie, which I just watched this...
From a Whisper to a Scream.
Okay, I don't need you to do this, Google. Oh, which is called Offspring, depending on where you watch it in the world. Which I've seen the movie. It's kind of like a Tales of the Crypt. I didn't like it first, when I first started watching it, but later on in the movie, it gets very good. It's four small stories. I don't want to spoil anything. I will review it on the channel eventually. Hey, it's a great movie. It stars Vincent Price. An amazing movie. The director saw this independently made movie. The New Line executive saw this independently made movie and loved every bit of it. He thought this was an amazing movie. He wanted to know who directed this movie. So he did his research looking at the credits, and well, Jeff Burr. The late, great Jeff Burr. No, not... Oh my god, this Google is stupid. Don't ever voice type anybody. Just realized I put an E. I know, this video is so epic, right? The late, great Jeff Burr. There he is, who passed away a little over a year ago, or a little less than a year ago. Rest in peace, Jeff Burr. He saw this movie, and he loved it. And so, if Peter Jackson didn't work out, which it was looking like Peter Jackson was not going to work out, the New Line executive showed this movie to the others, and they liked it too. So they wanted him to step in as director and one of the writers on the Leatherface, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And then they had found out that he had directed The Stepfather 2, which was a success. So then that wanted them even more to step in. So Jeff Burr was contacted, and Jeff Burr came in at the 11th hour, or as director. He would also serve as one of the writers on the film. And Jeff Burr stepped in, and as director. David H. Shoach, who had worked on some Tales of the Crypts episodes and some Goosebumps from the 90s episodes, which Jeff Burr would actually work as a writer on too, for Goosebumps, and would actually get a credit on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, and would step in as writer. Him and Jeff Burr would write a script together. They would revisit the original. They wanted to include parts from Part 2 and really go off Part 2 and 1, but New Line Cinema really wanted to go away from Part 2, especially, and Part 1. They sort of wanted to make a softcore reboot, but then not a reboot. In fact, to the point where Jeff Burr had to say, are we making a sequel or a reboot? New Line had actually had 3 or 4 sequels planned for this. So, what happened was, for the film, they ended up not being able to mention Part 2 at all. Part 2 would only be mentioned in sort of Easter eggs, like on the Saw, it says the Saw's family, the very famous Drayton storyline, this character here that the mouse is on, and Tinker, he would have a hook, a can, reference to Chop Top. Caroline Williams, who played Stretch in Part 2, she would get a cameo. The grandpa thing, Leatherface looking all beat up like he's been through hell, as sort of references saying that Part 2 happened. Not directly, but kind of like having your cake and eating it at the same time. And then Part 1 would briefly be mentioned in the beginning, very, very briefly, too into it. Well, the film would be released. Jeff Burr was not liked. He was very rushed. They spent a lot of money on the film. He actually ended up getting fired and then rehired because nobody else would do it. And they spent a lot on the film. Well, the film would end up getting released. It was originally scheduled to be released in October of 1989. Well, that fell through. Then it was supposed to be released in November of 1989. Well, the film would not end up getting released until dumped into mid-January of 1990. Yeah, probably the worst time of year to release a horror film. The best time to release a horror film is either summer or October season. I'm sorry, I'm saying it. It's the truth. The film would get very mixed reviews. It was, in fact, it came in 11th place in its first week, and then it would drop down to 14th. It didn't make a lot of money, especially New Line Cinema spent a lot of money on posters and action figures like this and posters like this, and a lot of marketing on this film. In fact, Gunnar Hansen was actually offered to play the role of Leatherface. I know it's off topic, I just want to say this, but he turned it down. That's a different video. But they spent a lot of money on marketing and stuff. The film would make back its budget and a little profit, but they thought that this film was going to make back its budget, and they thought it was going to make $90 or $95 million. They thought it was going to be critically acclaimed and praised, and they really thought that it was going to be an amazing movie, that was going to be able to spawn, 3-4 sequels, maybe a TV show. Well, the film didn't exactly do that. Now, the film was edited down a lot. There were a few scenes that were taken out of it, and a lot of the gore was taken out of it too, and the ending was actually changed behind Jeff Burr's back. Jeff Burr and David H. Shoach did not actually know that the ending had been changed until they went and saw it in theaters, apparently. Because Jeff Burr actually says that he thinks that had it had the original ending, and it also had the gore been kept in, it would have been much more successful. The film, like I said, it did alright, made back its budget, made a little bit of profit. Nowhere nearly as successful as they thought it would be. So all future sequels would be canceled to the film. And the film would sort of serve as a disappointment to the Texas Chainsaw franchise. In fact, it's known as nowadays as the most boring Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie or the most forgettable. This and In the Beginning. I actually like this film. A lot of people dog on it, but I actually like it. It's in the top 3. I think it's a 10 out of 10 movie. I do like it. Now, I'm going to give the real reason why I think this film failed. it introduced all these new family members that were nowhere to be found in parts 1 or 2. Oh, and then it also basically ignoring the first two, and ignoring the characters and stuff, and like not explaining like how did Grandpa's body get out of there, how did Leatherface escape, stuff like that. How did Leatherface survive Dennis Hopper putting a chainsaw through his stomach and getting blown up? It didn't explain that, and I think that's the main reason why it sort of toned down. I can see why people would say it's boring. I mean, it is a movie called Leatherface, and Leatherface doesn't show up until like midway through it. But I still like it. I think it's a pretty good movie. I love Ken Foree in it. Viggo Mortensen's pretty good in it. And it's an alright movie. I think it's people say it's an alright movie, but I think it's a 10 out of 10 and movie. It's definitely in the top 3 Texas Chainsaw Massacres for me. That this, part 1 and 2, I think are the best 3. But yeah, that was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. It has gotten more popular over the years. Not as popular as part 2 or, the reboot have come to be. But hey, still, pretty good movie, pretty popular movie. A pretty good movie, in my opinion, yeah. So that's going to be it for this video, everyone. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comment section, have you seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3? What are your thoughts on it? Did you like it? Have you seen it? Have you seen clips of it? What are your thoughts on it? Where do you rank this in the franchise? And also, comment what's your favorite Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. Alright, everyone, I'm going to put the link to the badass trailer in the comment section, and I'm also going to, in the description, I'm also going to put the link to my interview with Bob Elmore, who played Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. He actually did the majority of the scenes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. As Bill Johnson did a couple scenes, but he did the majority of the scenes. So yeah, so I'm going to put the link to that, trying to get more views on that video, and I will put the link in the description for that badass trailer. Alright, everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. I truly appreciate it. Like, share, comment, favorite, and most importantly, please subscribe and ding the bell. Alright, everyone, thanks for watching. God bless you. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everybody.